You asked, and we heard you, America.
Real America's Voice is coming to iHeartMedia.
Yes, Real America's Voice is now breaking through the white noise of the mainstream media.
Just download the iHeart app, and you'll have all of us right at your fingertips.
Scan the QR code and start streaming RAV anywhere you want.
Real America's Voice, available whenever you need us.
It's never been easier to stay connected with the voices you trust.
RAV on iHeart means you can take us with you wherever you go.
This is huge. The truth on iHeart. Ready whenever you are.
From Charlie Kirk to Steve Bannon, Jack Posobiec to Grant Stinchfield, you'll find all your favorite RAV hosts in one place.
You can listen on Spotify, Apple, Pandora, or Amazon. RAV is now available everywhere you get your podcasts. All you need to do is scan the QR code right now.
Download the iHeart app today and get ready for Real America's Voice.
Scan the QR code and join the RAV movement.
Good evening, America, and welcome to the Wednesday edition of Just the News, No Noise. I'm your host, John Solomon, reporting to you, as always, from the nation's capital and the wiredtofishcoffee.com studios. You know, Wired to Fish Coffee is the official coffee of Just the News. It's also my family's favorite coffee. You can go right now to wiredtofishcoffee.com and get a fantastic 10% discount, including on their brand new 2-pound super large bag. It's a great discount. You get it for less than $20 if you use the promo code Just News. Go check that out. All right, Doge is top of mind everywhere in the country right now, including on Capitol Hill and also in the White House, where President Trump today held his first cabinet meeting, a meeting in which Elon Musk, the head of Doge, well, he attended and, well, he had a lot to say. The world's richest man was discussing his efforts to cut wasteful spending in the government and why it is so important. Here's a little bit of what he had to say to his fellow to the cabinet members today.
The overall goal here with the Doge team is to help address the enormous deficit. We simply cannot sustain as a country $2 trillion deficits. The interest rates, just the interest on the national debt, now exceeds the Defense Department spending. We spend a lot on the Defense Department, but we're spending like over $1 trillion on interest. If this continues, the country will become de facto bankrupt. It's not an optional thing, it is an essential thing.
Amazing numbers. There are now more money spent on servicing the debt than even employing our military for the world's security. How about that? That's an amazing number that Elon Musk gave people today. Well, while people in America get this mainstream press, well, they're up in arms. They're really quite upset about all of this discussion of cutting bureaucrats and jobs. But there's a fascinating poll that came out today from our good friend Scott Rasmussen, the great pollster. 59% of Americans love the idea of Doge and the possibility that maybe some of the savings could come back in the form of a one-time form of tax relief. We'll see if that actually happens. Meanwhile, last night, the Republican-controlled House passed their first budget bill. The Senate and House have both passed a budget plan before the beginning of March. No one thought that possible a few weeks ago. We're going to be tackling that in just a second. But before I do that, I want to turn to my amazing co-host, Amanda Head. Amanda, today an email went out telling federal agencies, cut the staff. Big time. Get ready for mass layoffs. A big moment today.
Get ready. Yeah, I can imagine for those people that was a bit of an uncomfortable message to receive from them.
Yeah.
All right. So a lot of news coming today, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about Doge for a minute, because the level of vitriol that we are seeing about budget cuts is, I think, probably shocking to a lot of Americans. And we are in more debt than any country in history, and trying to find even a single dollar to cut is causing a lot of consternation on Capitol Hill. In fact, just asking what government workers are doing apparently is creating issues, which is incredible because every American working in the private sector has been asked at least once what they have been doing or what they are working on. And frankly, it shouldn't be that hard of a question to answer. It shouldn't take much time, but for some, I guess it is. And Elon Musk was forced to address it in the president's cabinet meeting today as well. Watch.
I think that email perhaps was best interpreted as a performance review, but actually it was a pulse check review. Do you have a pulse? Do you have a pulse and 2 neurons? So if you have a pulse and 2 neurons, you can reply to an email. We think there are a number of people on the government payroll who are dead, which is probably why they can't respond. And some people who are not real people, like they're literally fictional individuals that are collecting paychecks. Well, somebody's collecting paychecks on a fictional individual. So we're just literally trying to figure out, are these people real? Are they alive? And can they write an email?
None of that sounds even remotely scandalous, but that doesn't mean that the media isn't trying to find other ways to criticize cutting the budget, because they keep inferring that Republicans will potentially try to cut Medicaid and Social Security, something that President Trump has repeatedly over and over and over again said that he is not going to be doing, and he again was asked about it at the cabinet meeting today.
Can you guarantee that Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security will not be touched?
Yeah, I mean, I have said it so many times, you shouldn't be asking me that question. Okay? This will not be read my lips. It won't be read my lips anymore. We're not going to touch it. Now, we are going to look for fraud. I'm sure you're okay with that, like people that shouldn't be on, people that are illegal aliens and others, criminals in many cases.
John, it just kind of seems like that old tactic that the media pulled in President Trump's first administration, where they're trying to drum up scandal, is not working as well this time around.
American people are just disconnected from it too. They're on the same page as President Trump. The media's on some other page with the one percenters and the deep state and the administrative state. Well, we're very lucky to kick the show off with somebody who is on the same page as President Trump. He's been fighting for a long time to shrink government. He was one of the people proudly voting for last night's House budget reconciliation bill that made a big dent in spending in Washington. Joining us now from the great state of Oklahoma, Congressman Josh King. Congressman, good to have you on the show, sir.
Thank you. Always honored to be with you, too.
We love having you on the show. I want to get to some of the things you're doing specifically, but I wanted to start off. I don't think a lot of people appreciate how historic it is that the Senate and House got a budget blueprint done by March 1st and that it saves hundreds of billions of dollars.
Yeah, what is going to happen if we'll allow this process to play out is that we're going to have a chance to save the republic. And I'm not trying to over dramatize that. The reality is there's been no country that has been able to survive once you get to what Elon and your reporting is talking about, is when your interest payments start exceeding your entire spend on the national defense. And you can look at over history, and every country has a great demise when they get to that point. So we have a moment in time here to turn this thing around. I'm excited about the product that we put forward. I'm on the budget committee. There was a group of us that worked very handily. Big shout out to Jody Arrington, our budget committee chairman, who held true. We began this process working with the speaker, our entire conference. We have to make sure we don't miss this moment in time. There's going to be some tough choices, but the result is going to be that we complete the mandate, the mission statement of the Constitution, that we provide the blessing of liberty to our posterity, not just ourselves.
Absolutely. Congressman, what continues to amaze me, though, is, this is popular with the American people. As John was just talking about in that Neapolitan poll, 59% of Americans are on board with slashing, with cutting out the waste, fraud, and abuse. And that, of course, ties into slashing a lot of those things in this bill. For Democrats who are not on board, I understand that there are a lot of Republican and Democrats who have a vested interest in some of the things that were cut out of this bill. But you would think that with the support of the American people to that level, that Democrats might actually get on board. Do you think there's any chance of that happening anytime soon?
Look, I had a great mentor, Tom Coburn, who always used to say that waste has a constituency. It does.
I think we found it.
There's somebody whose ox is going to get gored in this process. But what everyone, that's when you're focused on the few. We have to focus on the many. And let me describe what's happening to the many so everybody understands this. As Milton Friedman once said, every budget out of Washington, D.C. is balanced. You say, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. Yeah, it does. Think about it for a moment. They're either going to tax you in the moment, or they're going to borrow in the future, or they're going to inflate their way out of it. Every budget is balanced. That hidden tax of inflation that since January 2020 has cost the average family of four, what we know has been like $1,500 a month more, that inflationary tax. We are a country that is on the cusp of, in the future at some point, hyperinflation. And since January 2020, we know the facts say that you're paying on average 20% for a basket of goods, 20% more than you were just a few years ago. You're paying for this. And this opportunity to stop the bleed is, I think, a once in a lifetime opportunity when you have the leader of X who's walked away getting nothing out of this financially and is trying to, with the platform he's been provided with this purchase of Twitter, now X, has brought a grassroots movement to be excited about. You mean we actually have a chance to stop the potential of hyperinflation? We have the chance to make sure that devaluation of our currency is not a absolute. We do.
Yeah, it's a pretty historic moment. And as you said, you have to answer the bell at this moment. And I think Congress did last night. I want to drill down to something you're doing, because in addition to cutting spending, you're also cutting some of the red tape that creates expenses that move down to the American people in the form of product costs and on employment and other things. You're the co-sponsor of the RAINS Act, which I believe made it into this reconciliation bill. There's a chance to get the Senate to sign on to this and put it in. Tell us why the RAINS Act is so important to everyday Americans like you and me.
Yeah, look, huge shout out to Kat Kamek. She was kind enough. She's been carrying this for years. She was kind enough to allow me to, on her behalf, introduce that in the Budget Committee as a part of this reconciliation package. The bill that President Trump is referring to is the big, beautiful bill. Well, the fourth branch of government that we know is a violation, often the bureaucracy, the 20 and 30-year-olds who are writing law, yet Article 1, Section 1 says all legislative power is to be vested in the Congress. It flies absolutely in the face of what our founders intended. And they never designed, people often say, just get things done. If you read Federalist Papers, there was a Federalist writing that talked about, we knew by having a presidential veto and a bicameral legislative body of the Senate, different from the House, different from parliaments in Europe, that we were making it hard to pass even good bills. But that Federalist paper goes on to talk about, we were more concerned about the excess of lawmaking. And we were more concerned about bad bills, the ease of bad bills being passed. That's why we created this complicated process. And they actually, in that same Federalist paper, I think it's Federalist 73, said what we really were after in setting up this thing, the system of government, was stability. And you know what's happened? The bureaucracy has come in and overridden the wisdom of the Constitution, and that's why we have this fourth branch of government. The RAINS Act simply says we're returning back to a place where a bureaucracy writes a rule that has $100 million impact upon everyone in our culture, businesses, large and small. Then the legislative body is the backstop. No longer do they have to disapprove it. You have to get permission from Congress, and so it puts the Congress back into the right place of Article 1. And so I hope it remains a part of this reconciliation package.
Yes,
important.
Sir, I want to ask you about the Healthy SNAP Act, because when we think of the SNAP Act in general, I mean, there have been so many studies that the overwhelming majority of expenditures that utilize the SNAP Act, it's processed food, it's sodas, it's candy, it's nothing that's healthy. Tell me about the Healthy SNAP Act, because I think that this is a really good way to improve the health of America.
Yeah, so go back to years before, there were certain food groups that were a part of the historic food stamp program. The WIC program absolutely applies that when you're talking about nursing mothers, and it's because of the nutritional value. 20% of the total SNAP food stamp program, historically known as, is junk food. 10% of the total is just soda. And so we know the casualty of what obesity is doing to the cost, federal government cost. My measure used to be with Marco Rubio when he was in the U.S. Senate. Now that he's gone to the cabinet, is Senator Mike Lee and I are reintroducing this concept. And what we're saying is, if you want to buy junk food on your own dime, that's up to you. We're not trying to limit what you do with your own purchase. What we're saying is, on the taxpayer dime, we're going to limit food stamps to nutritious purchases. And then when you take into account that 1 out of 8 Americans right now is on food stamps, 1 out of 4 Americans is on Medicaid. We know that the downhill consequence of what is being ingested on the food stamp population is carrying over to the 1 in 4 that are on Medicaid. The 20% cost associated relative to our GDP of our healthcare in this country is unbelievable. We spend twice what every other developed country spends on the healthcare cost. We spend about $12,000 per individual. Every other country, $6,000. So not only can we solve what is a very poor choice, but the downhill effect of cost the federal government oftentimes is picking up the tab for on healthcare expenses. So this thing is a win-win on 2 different fronts.
Yeah, taxpayers were funding the unhealthy diet that led to added health expenditures downstream. It's such an important cycle to break for everyone. I want to ask one more question before we let you go, sir. Your colleague, Congressman Mike Kennedy from Louisiana, I believe, sponsored the Get Back to Work Act. That also put some new requirements on SNAP to consider work. How popular do you think this is, and how do you think this could change America, both the economy and those on assistance?
John, there was a time in this country where both Democrats and Republicans didn't have any argument about this.
That's right.
Think about during the Roosevelt administration, all the work programs. They were all work specific. It was work brittle. In the 1920s, you had a maxim that said you cannot help the poor man by destroying the rich man. You can't strengthen the weak by weakening the strong. You can't lift the wage earner up by pulling the wage payer down. You can't build character and courage by taking away people's initiative and independence. And you can't help people permanently by doing for them what they could and should be doing for themselves. The very first successful colony we ever had in this nation was Jamestown. And you know what they applied? History tells you that they took a element out of 2 Thessalonians out of the Bible that said for those that they had seen other experiments of these colonies coming from Great Britain where they were allowed to have socialism. They weren't working because people weren't working in the summer. In the wintertime, people were trying to take advantage of those that worked. So they implemented at Jamestown finally, thou shalt not work, thou shalt not eat. It was the first successful colony. Wow. And so we're a country that believes in work ethic, and we have to right-size this. What happened under the Clinton administration? We did changes on work performance, work program, getting people back into the workforce. Yeah. This is something, again, that Democrats and Republicans once believed in, and it is common sense. And common sense is hopefully going to be re-injected back into our culture.
Yeah, we used to call it workfare, and it was very popular. And I have a funny feeling it's going to be popular again. Congressman, what a great honor to have you on the show today. We're going to be watching that RAINS Act. It could be one of the most historic things that come out of this reconciliation bill.
Shout out to Kat Kamek. Absolutely.
Well, and you as well for stepping to get through the committee, sir. Good to have you on today. Thanks so much. All right, folks. We're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, another congressman is going to join us, Tom Barrett. He's got a lot to say. We'll have that right after these messages. Hey, America, the fight to restore our great nation is only beginning, and now is the time to take a stand, and Patriot Mobile is leading the charge. As America's only Christian conservative wireless provider, Patriot Mobile offers a way to vote with your wallet without compromising on quality or convenience. That's important, right? Patriot Mobile isn't just about providing exceptional cell phone service. It's a call to action to defend our rights and our freedoms. With Patriot Mobile, you'll get outstanding nationwide coverage because they operate on all 3 major networks. Now, if you have cell phone service today, you can get cell phone service with Patriot Mobile with a coverage guarantee. But the difference is every dollar you spend supports the First and Second Amendments, the sanctity of life, and our veterans and first responders. Switching is easy. Keep your number, keep your phone, or upgrade. Their 100% U.S.-based customer support team are going to help you find the right plan for you. Right now, go to patriotmobile.com/justnews or call 972-PATRIOT and get a free month of service with promo code JUSTNEWS. Switch to Patriot Mobile today and defend freedom with every call and text you make. Visit patriotmobile.com/justnews or call 972-PATRIOT.
Welcome back, everybody. Before we get into our next guest, a quick programming note. President Trump is going to be signing executive orders in the Oval Office. It is slated to happen in about 10 minutes, so we're going to keep an eye on that, and we will cut to that when the time is appropriate. All right, a lot of news on the foreign policy front lately as President Trump, of course, looks to make America strong again, and he wants to do that because the Trump administration is finally trying to get back to a peace through strength approach. So how does the president and his team do that, and what can Congress do to help? Joining us now is military veteran and freshman congressman from Michigan, Tom Barrett. Congressman Barrett, thank you so much for having us. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate that, Amanda. Thank you.
Absolutely, sir. So you are fresh up on Capitol Hill, and you come in, and then Republicans have, you know, I understand it was a very slim win, but I think symbolically it means a lot to have passed this resolution last night. Does this pave the way for easier passage on other things coming up?
You know, I sure hope so. I'm an optimistic person. In fact, I was voted the most optimistic of my high school class quite a long time ago. So, but I am an optimistic guy, and I think that there's reason to be optimistic, right? I mean, a lot of people didn't think we would be able to pass this budget resolution last night. I'm really proud and thankful that we were able to do that our colleagues came together and really looked at across our Republican conference the different priorities that each of us had to say, you know what, we are willing to not lay aside our differences, but acknowledge that we have differences of perspective, but we all want to move the country forward in the right direction. And this vote last night was an important way of doing that. It starts the process for us to really do what we said we were going to come here to do, continue the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, make sure that we don't stall our economy because it would lead to the largest tax increase in American history if we fail to act here as members of Congress. Make sure that we secure our border, probably the #1 issue affecting American safety and quality of life is our open border under the Biden administration. We're so grateful that President Trump has taken action to secure our border, but now it's on us in the Congress to make sure that we codify a lot of those issues that we need to see and fund the enforcement of our border. Director Noem has reported to members of Congress that we're weeks away from running out of funding to make sure that we can carry out the deportation of dangerous people that are in our country illegally. So we've got to make sure that we do the hard work to do that. We've got to unleash American energy, drive our economy forward, make up for lost wages that Americans have suffered under during the Biden administration, during high inflation and lost wages and lower quality of life. We want to do all of those things, so we're moving the agenda forward, and the step last night was a great step in the right direction.
Yeah, no doubt. And American people are taking note of it. Sir, long before you served your country in Congress, you served it in uniform. You used to fly helicopters for the U.S. Army. There is a lot of questions still surrounding what happened, that tragedy here in the nation's capital over the Potomac River. I know you've been working on a solution, a legislative solution. Could you bring us up to speed on what you're working on?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, obviously it goes without saying probably, but our heart goes out to all of those, the souls lost during that tragic, airplane helicopter collision right here in our nation's capital, something that all of us can really empathize with the tragedy that took place. And prior to coming to Congress, I flew helicopters in the Army. It was actually first rated on the Black Hawk during my flight training that I did in the Army a number of years ago. And I'm working right now on really making sure that we have the Department of Defense analyze the feasibility of upgrading our military equipment to ensure that we have that traffic collision avoidance that civilian aircraft have right now, but our military aircraft often do not have. In that ability to synchronize those two systems together, it requires both aircraft to have that system installed for it to operate properly. And we know that on the night that this happened, the Army helicopter did not have that equipment on board because it's not necessary for combat operations. But so much of our military training flights are done in civilian airspace that I think it makes sense to really explore whether or not we can install this on military equipment, whether it would open up a vulnerability for our adversaries to exploit that in some way. We certainly have to be mindful and guarded against that. But the first step in this is ensuring or really looking at the feasibility of installing this. I'm introducing a bill on that this week. I'm very hopeful that we can get something around this done to ensure the safety of everybody, both on the civilian side of this as well as the military side, to make sure that we can have interoperability between military and civilian equipment operating in our nation's airspace. This is a horrible tragedy. I've got a lot of thoughts about what could have been done differently to prevent this from happening. But as we stand right now, of course, this is our largest tragedy in over a decade in civilian airspace. We want to keep Americans safe, and I think this is the first step in doing that.
Absolutely.
Very wise.
Congressman, on the foreign policy front, last week the hullabaloo seemed to be that President Trump was having conversations with Russia and having conversations with Ukraine, and it wasn't happening together, and they seem to forget that that's usually how it goes when you're trying to bring two people together. But I want to ask you about what we are witnessing now, because President Trump seems to have come to an agreement, especially on critical minerals with respect to Ukraine and the land that Russia will give up or assume with respect to what happened in 2014 and the lines drawn there. President Trump's success on this has got to be so stark to the American people, considering Joe Biden wasn't really able to accomplish anything close to this.
Right. If you look historically, right, the attacks against President Trump are that he's, somehow become close with Vladimir Putin. But if you look at the actual real history of this, Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine and took Crimea while guess who was in office? Barack Obama. President Barack Obama. And then the 4 years of President Trump's first term in office, Vladimir Putin invaded no countries and took no territory in Ukraine. And then when Joe Biden was president, immediately on the heels of the disastrous, absolute collapse in Afghanistan, our adversaries were watching and Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine. So we know with certainty that while President Trump was in office, Vladimir Putin took no territory and did not invade any parts of Ukraine whatsoever. So the fact that President Trump is back in office is bringing these parties to the table to figure out the pathway forward. The tragic loss of life, people like myself who have been deployed in our nation's wars and deployed across the world to really carry out the mission of our nation, really recognize the total effect that war has. It's not just on those on the battlefield. It is on the innocent civilians that are innocent bystanders there. It's the loss of life on both sides of any armed conflict. And then it's the decades-long effect of all of that that has to be considered as we look at the total human cost of war. It is an absolute tragedy when that happens. And I think we have to approach everything in a way that we reduce the duration of these things. I mean, this carrying on as long as it has already has led to an absolutely devastating loss of life. And anything we can do to bring about a resolution to reduce the human cost of war, reduce the loss of life is something that we ought to be very willing to do. And ultimately, it'll take the Ukrainians and the Russians to figure out what their ultimate resolution of this is going to be. But I think President Trump being involved in this is going to hopefully bring about a resolution.
Yeah, no doubt. Sir, one more. We got about a minute left. I want to ask about something you did. You're a freshman. Can you have a real impact? You and a few others wrote a letter to the Ag Secretary a couple days ago saying, hey, we need a big plan for dealing with inflation, particularly egg prices. Today, the Ag Secretary came back with $1 billion plan to address exactly what you have. I want to get your reaction to Brooke Rowland's plan and the fact that she responded so quickly to you.
Yeah, no, I mean, it doesn't take anybody to really recognize, you don't have to be a genius to see that the cost of eggs has gone so high across our country that we have to do something to intervene about this. I don't think that eggs should be so unaffordable for families like mine across our country that we have to do everything we can within the federal authority make sure that we drive this down. Some of this is coupled by failed state policies that have ridiculous rules about what type of eggs can be sold based on, what type of chickens are raised and everything else. But from the federal level, making sure that we can do everything we can to control the spread of avian flu, have better policies so that we're not wholesale euthanizing chickens, hens that could be laying eggs that are unaffected by it, I think is doing this smarter, doing it better, and making sure that we can bring about a resolution to the just astronomical high price of eggs facing every American family right now.
Much appreciated.
And it was great to see her stamp of approval on backyard chickens. We need more of those for sure. Congressman Tom Barrett.
Is that home?
Yes, sir, absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Congressman. We'll have you back on very soon.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
Yes, sir. All right, coming up after the break, we're going to discuss election integrity, because even though President Trump won this time around, does anyone think that our elections are completely secure? We're going to get to that next.
Welcome back, America. Over the last few years, as more and more examples of voter fraud have come to the public, and there have been prosecutions and entire elections overturned, such as in Bridgeport, Connecticut, my old hometown, a lot of questions have surfaced, and one of them is, what can we all do to make a difference to police for voter integrity and election integrity? Our next guest has jumped into that void. He found it and is the president of the Voter Reference Foundation, which has managed to get those voter files in more than 36 states, or nearly 36 states, public, so you and I can go check and make sure there's no fake people on. That is an incredible accomplishment. Joining us now, as I said, the founder and president of the Voter Reference Foundation, Doug Truex. Doug, good to have you on.
Hey, John, thanks for having me on.
This is such a labor of transparency. Buying these voter files, getting them up is no small task. Almost 2/3 of the country now potentially accessible to the American people. That's amazing. Tell us the benefit and what some people are starting to do to use these databases.
Right, so it's accessible to anybody at voteref.com. So Voter Reference Foundation is the organization, and voteref.com is where you can go to see your state. We have a big map up there right away that tell you which states of the 34 that we've got up there. We're on our way to 50. But what you can do is you can go in and pull down your precinct where you live and say, I'm going to go check my addresses around here and say, why are there 4 people registered at this P.O. box? Why are there a bunch of people registered at this lot over here? And that's actually been going on. I would say it's a curiosity sometimes for people to go, I want to see if my neighbor next door is a Republican or Democrat. I tell you, that's a lot of it right out of the gate. But I can tell you too, there's a lot of people out there that are very much into this, like the voter integrity groups in different counties. It's kind of like a outgrowth of like the Tea Party movement and all that super conservative people that are really interested in election confidence, and they pull all that information down and they go check it themselves, and then they start interacting with their county election officials, who are the ones who can start to fix the voter rolls. And I think a lot of times it's just been neglect, or maybe nefarious in some cases, depending on where you live, that people are, election officials are letting the voter files just contain all these names that they're dead people, they've moved, whatever else. And so, I grew up politically in Chicago, so I know how this works, right? You just know that somebody found the voter file that's really not going to vote, and you send somebody else through there and tell them, they say that's who they are, and they just do that. And you can cycle through a lot of people that way. And elections are close now, very close, and we want to make sure in our country we've got 100% confidence in our election system. Otherwise, that's a bad outcome. So that's what we're working on.
Tip O'Neill used to say all politics is local, and there's nothing like local eyes to spot a suspicious address or a person they know is dead. It's such a brilliant idea. Congratulations for doing it.
It is. And I want to ask you about what the next step is, because, we always hear if you see something, say something. So if somebody sees that, like you said, there's 4 people voting out of this P.O. box, and I know that people aren't living inside that little, 10 by 4 by 4 box, what do they do at that point? Do they reach out to their state rep?
Yeah, that's right. So it's all the elections generally are county elections. There's county election officials, and so that's really where it begins. You can go to your county election office and say, hey, I've got this problem, I found this thing, I need some help with this. And there's ways to basically submit your request, and then they'll have to go and start looking through it. Now, I would tell you this, a lot of times they say, depending on who it is, if it's a Democrat county in some cases where they're not that interested in it, it's going to take some effort. And we've got people putting a lot of effort into this now, and the steady drumbeat of, hey, this is wrong, this is wrong. And where we want to get this to, it's just like any situation where you have full transparency. It's like you make a deposit in your bank account, you get on your app, and the money is right there. So we have the technology that we could get to a place eventually. They're doing great work in Ohio. Secretary of State Frank LaRoe is there. Yeah. We're basically trying to get to real time. Somebody moves, it changes right away. Somebody dies, it changes right away. Somebody votes, it changes right away. So people can see exactly what's happening in real time as you go forward in an election. That's real transparency. And then you wouldn't have to have all these situations where people are showing up with their attestations that, hey, this is wrong, I need to do this. So we'll get there eventually. I think that's where we're trying to pressure these county and state election officials to get to that place, because the technology exists. We just have to have the effort on behalf of the grassroots. And so this is where they get that ability, as they go on voteref.com and start interacting with it and pull those lists. And it really is it's like what you say, crowdsourcing transparency into the voter files, what's happening nationwide.
That's a historic effort, and congratulations for taking on, because it's going to have long dividends for the American public. I want to turn to what Congress can do. There's still a lot of issues that are weighing out there. An all-Republican Congress, it made promises during the election it would try to get some voter integrity into federal law that's missing. If you had to put your crystal ball into action for a second, where do you think there's some potential consensus for some federal legislation that might change and improve the integrity of elections nationwide?
Yeah, I think one of the main places we need to head towards is UCAVA, which is the overseas voting.
Yeah.
That is, you can only do it on federal elections, and so you have these situations where the standards for people voting from overseas are just horrific. I mean, you would not like to hear the stories that I've heard about some of these ballots that come in and they get counted in these federal elections if you just say you live in the state. And so that's an area where we've been looking at over time to say, well, if somebody were to cheat, then let's just, I also run Restoration of America. We do a lot of work in elections, and we put a lot of people on the ground in Philly and across the country. And so it's like, how do you keep people from cheating when you know what they're going to do? Well, you put a lot of poll workers and poll watchers there and things like that. But this UCAVA piece, it kind of just lands at these county election offices, and it's not real, it's not tight, to say the least. And so that is one area in particular that we should take a look at. And also, I think too, military voting. I served, and I know when I was in the Army, it's kind of hit or miss sometimes how it works. And so more attention there for sure, but definitely the overseas piece. And I think we want to, when the Democrats got in power, the HR 1 was the first step of like a full federal takeover of the elections. We don't want that. Love the Constitution, state by state, but we can still put a lot of pressure on the states as we go forward, as people in the state realize that, gosh, my state's not that good at voter integrity. I'm going to make some noise, and that's how it works. Groundswell over time. But the federal officials can, the congressional districts and everything, they can help a ton just working inside their state and working with their state election and county election officials as well.
Well, and if you get this done in all 50 states, I think that sends a message to Congress as well as far as the support behind it. How do you drag those remaining states across the finish line?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. So we had a problem with New Mexico. So ironically, I'm from New Mexico. I grew up there, and the rumor is I came back 17 years later with a federal lawsuit. And so we had to take those guys to court because the New Mexico Secretary of State said, oh no, you can't do this, and criminal felonies and things like that. So this was a strange time, and we just said, we're going to push through and do this anyway. And we took her to court, and we won in federal court. Very long opinion, like a 200-page opinion, because the judge was very careful about how he addressed the fact that these are public records, okay? Even though states say, well, that's private information and we don't want to have that out there, it's not real, okay? This is taxpayer dollars that paid for all this. People deserve to see the voter file because that's the truth of the transparency and democracy. So we won that federal lawsuit. And so we still are having, Indiana just got up, which is great. Surprised it took so long. I'm glad they did. It was, that's a red state and they were struggling. But the Dakotas are difficult, lots of blue states still. But once we won this federal decision, it put everybody on notice that you can say what you want, but we will take you to court and we will win. So now it's just a matter of time before we get all 50 states up. A lot of legal battles, a lot of effort, a lot of money goes into this thing. And so, people want to support it. Voter Reference Foundation is the place to go to support it. But we're on our way to all 50, and it'll be a new day for election transparency in this country when we get there. I just don't know exactly when, but it's going to happen.
What you and Dick Uihlein and all the great folks at Restoration have done has made a huge difference. We're all going to be able to help make us a better election system in the future because of the groundwork you've laid, Doug. Congratulations. Folks, everybody go to voteref.org and go check it out. It's an amazing resource. I check it often now. I love it. All right, we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, the media is fretting about RFK Jr. among many other things, right? Are any of those concerns valid? Well, we'll talk to the wellness company's great doctor, Peter McCullough, one of my favorites. Next, right after these messages. Welcome back, America. New sheriff in town, Donald Trump and the Republicans in charge, but some of the old tactics of fear-mongering still alive and well, particularly in the health space today, particularly as it relates to RFK Jr. and some of the things he's doing. I thought we'd turn to one of our great partners here at Real America's Voice and Just the News, the Wellness Company, and its Chief Scientific Officer, our good friend, Dr. Peter McCullough. Doctor, welcome back. Good to have you on.
Thank you.
All right, let me start with some news that went on today. We talked about it earlier in the show. Brooke Rollins unveiling a plan to bring down egg prices. Some of that is to maybe stop some of the culling of chicken crops that you've been talking about for a long time. I'd like to get your reaction, the good, the bad, and the ugly, about what she did today.
Well, she clearly was forthright and organized with these prongs, so the problem is going to actually be tackled, and we didn't see that in the prior administration at all. We'd like to hear from the large egg producers, Cal-Maine, Jenny O, Herbrooks, and others. How many birds are actually dying because of bird flu, and how many healthy birds are dying because of this biosecurity measure called culling, or intentionally killing the chickens? Rollins did get it right, that the mallard ducks are spreading the infection from farm to farm. So it doesn't matter how many birds they kill, the virus is going to come back because it's being spread by mallard ducks. So what we really want to hear is that the culling will stop. There'll be an allowance for natural immunity. Sick birds will be pulled out and destroyed, as they always are, and that we take reasonable measures to protect the workers from bird flu. So far, it's a mild illness.
Yeah.
Something else that Secretary Rollins indicated today was that the predominant concern with bird flu is among commercial facilities, not necessarily if you've got a hobby farm or backyard chickens or something like that. Does that check out for you as far as the virility of it?
It's true. Now, it brings up this issue of perverse incentives. She didn't mention this, but if the big companies are paid to kill the healthy chickens, and then they bring eggs to market at a higher price, the big companies benefit from the higher prices. They actually get greater profits. So the big companies are not voicing any concern regarding this policy, this biosecurity policy, because it's economically favorable to the big guys.
That's pretty remarkable, a double incentive. Earlier this week, some lawmakers announced a legislation to remove the liability protections that are sometimes granted to vaccine makers. Obviously, this is an idea that a lot of people coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic and all the things we've learned about the vaccine after the fact, thanks to your great work, have been talking about. How important is this legislation? Does it have a chance with Big Pharma lobbying Congress to get through?
I think it would be a constructive step in the right direction. That, and then eliminating any school requirements or mandates for childhood vaccines. Let it become completely elective. Let the markets play out, and let the companies bring better products to market and make a compelling case that our children should take them.
Yeah.
Sir, the message from the left seems to be the characterization that people are anti-vax. If they are even asking questions about why the vaccine schedule has exploded so much, it seems to me that there is actually, though, a pretty sizable group of Americans moving back into the space where we say, okay, on day one of a baby's life, we're not going to give them the vitamin K shot or the eye drops, especially if the mother's not infected. But down the road, things like MMR, which we were talking a moment ago about the measles outbreak in Texas, those things are still safe. Does it seem to you that that is the direction that we are going with respect to vaccines and what the left calls, vaccine skeptics?
The great concern is actually what's called compound safety. So it's giving multiple vaccines all at once. And does the immune system react? Is the inflammation too great in some children? Does it trigger sudden infant death syndrome or result in a case of neuropsychiatric damage to the child after a febrile seizure? So compound safety is a top concern. And I think the second concept is risk stratification. Not all children need all the vaccines. And I think once we get to who needs what, we'll be giving out fewer vaccines, and it'll be safer because they can be given individually and at the right times.
one of the things that you helped us get back to, Dr. McCullough, was the realization that the doctor-patient relationship needed to be restored, that one size does not fit all, and that Americans should have more choices and the ability to prepare for things ahead of time, not waiting for the CDC to decide when you can get treatment. You've done a lot at the Wellness Company to get that marketplace created, to create those choices. Those emergency medical kits you created. Remind everybody what's available today and how you can take health into your own hands, legally, lawfully, and common sense-wise.
Well, boy, this comes up for bird flu. I think all of the poultry and farm workers should have the black contagion kit on hand, or the big companies should have a stockpile of these ready to distribute by their medical directors. Every worker should be using a dilute iodine nasal spray like Immune Mist, featured by the Wellness Company, twice a day, so they do not, carry the H5N1 virus in their nose, mouth, or you can even use iodine drops in the eyes to keep our workers safe. So we need to focus on worker safety and protection. Wellness Company is the only company that has this type of program available to protect our workers.
Yeah, it's groundbreaking. There's no doubt about it.
Before we let you go, because I know that there are probably a lot of parents in particular who want to get something like this because they want to have that layer of protection. It comes with all the instructions, all of the indications, everything, right?
Yeah, they come with guidebooks and access to telemedicine. Most mothers, fathers are able to navigate through this pretty easily. If you need to, have a conversation with a doctor, it's all included. The big kit is called the field kit. So a lot of families want to have the big base kit. It has everything possible there to handle emergencies, urgencies at home, and avoid the expensive urgent care emergency room.
I've got one addition I'd like to make to it. I think everybody should get a copy of the McCullough Protocol, because you had COVID-19 right from the beginning. Here at Just the News, we're going to get that up. I'm going to put it out on social media so everybody keeps that in their back pocket. Next time they won't get misled. Dr. McCullough, all you've done to get common sense back in medicine, it is greatly appreciated. We love this partnership, and you've done something special for our audience. Folks, if you go to twc.health/justnews. Let me do it again, twc.health/justnews. You can get an incredible discount on these kits, 10% just by using the promo code JustNews. Go do that. Be prepared. Don't wait for a medical emergency to hit. You'll have it in your cabinet ready to go. All right, we're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be back in a second to wrap up the day's news right after these messages.
Welcome back, everybody. I want to hit on one California topic before we get to the topic, this update on the RFK, JFK, MLK, and Epstein files. We're going to update you on that in just a moment. But I want to show you a clip of a Coachella City Councilwoman, Yadira Perez, and what happened for her and her family. Check it out.
They are taking my husband away. These are FBI agents who work for Border Patrol. I want everybody to know my family was just separated.
Her family was just separated. And she was interviewed later and asked if her husband had a criminal record, and she did say he was not a perfect person, which of course no one is, but she did fail to leave out a number of things: that he's a previously deported Mexican illegal alien, lengthy rap sheet, felony convictions, including possession of controlled substance, meth for sale, inflicting corporal injury to a spouse, DUI, and assault with a deadly weapon. So, you know, I can...
According to ICE, right, those information came from Immigration Customs and Enforcement, so the government's, those are their records.
And it's important to keep the facts in mind, because there's going to be a lot of media spin up about these deportations and the separation of families, and so it's just important to make sure that we have all of the facts when we see stories like this. But John, we've got those files that have been sitting on Pam Bondi's desk for a few days, and do you think they will see the light of day?
We'll see. I think there was a little bit of disappointment in Congress and in some of the transparency quarters of today when Patrick Davis, top Justice Department official, and then Trump, by the way, good guy, Trump official guy, wrote a letter back to Anna Paulina Luna saying, hey, we're looking at your request and we'll do it according to our record-keeping obligations. It was kind of bureaucratic. It wasn't sort of the response that Pam Bondi created excitement with a few weeks ago. I don't know what to read into this yet. We're doing some reporting on it tonight, but just a little while ago, Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna put that letter up. A lot of people reacting and saying, what a bureaucratic response to such a direct question. The question is, are you going to release the records, and what are they? Not the satisfactory answer yet, but Patrick Davis is a very good guy. He was on the Hill working for Senator Grassley, was a big part of the teams that broke a lot of news and got a lot of transparency. So hopefully this is just a form letter and not the direction that this is going to go, because I think a lot of people expect it this coming month would be a big transparency month. We'll see what happens to that. But that's the latest, hot off the press, just happened a little bit ago.
That's right, literally. Yeah. And speaking of transparency, that cabinet meeting today, everybody blending brains and ideas, giving an update to the president and the vice president. It was a little different to me than his first term, his first cabinet meeting in his first term. This time seemed like it was just ready to get down to business. It was like there wasn't even any time.
There wasn't even a napping president. Yeah. The president was awake for the whole time. Oh, that was a Biden year. I'm sorry, wrong White House. Sorry, my bad. Yeah, it was amazing. Almost every cabinet member had news to break in them. Elon Musk made some news. He put those new numbers out as we showed at the beginning. Right. Pete Hegseth said, hey, we're going back and bringing accountability to the withdrawal and the failed withdrawal from Afghanistan. That was news. Brooke Rollins confirming her effort to get egg prices down. The whole cabinet had news in the meeting. It was probably one of the newsiest cabinet meetings I've seen as a journalist in my 3 decades here. This is a cabinet and an administration that's trying to get things done by the minute. And I think you saw that in the way the meeting played out there. It's really interesting.
Yeah. Speaking of chickens, I'm sure we could find some empty office space around here. I think that we should sponsor some chickens and name them all after our staffers here and just keep them here, and then we can all have free eggs.
I'll have to talk to the building about that. I'm not sure it's going to meet our lease terms. We'll have to see.
It.
I like the idea of home chickens back. When I go out to my cabin in the Shenandoahs, there's chickens all around. I've got to be careful when I'm driving that I don't make an early dinner for someone. So
I want to ask you about this video that President Trump retweeted or retruthed. The Trump Gaza clip that, it has this dystopic, actually accurate view of what God. Do we have a copy?
Hey guys, do we have the Gaza? There it is. I think it's there down there, yeah.
So, World War Z type imagery at first, and then it moves into, golden statues and skyscrapers, as you see there.
Yep. I think they're sunbathing at the end, aren't they? I think there's Elon. Look at that. He's having a great time.
Yeah. Although the hula girls don't exactly belong in Gaza.
Yeah, the AI was a little off on that. Yeah, it's pretty fun, though. You know what's a reminder of? You can do a lot of work, do the people's work, and still have a little fun here and there. And I think compared to the last Trump presidency, Donald Trump's just having fun, and I think Americans enjoy that. We can laugh a little bit. We can laugh at ourselves sometimes. Yeah. We can poke fun at ideas that caught some controversy without being offended. And I'm sure some people were offended, but I certainly was. I thought it was funny, and it's just a reminder that we can all laugh.
Yep. Okay. Medical price transparency. It has been one of the top complaints of American utilizers of insurance companies.
Another check mark today.
Wow. That is
done.
Yep.
President Trump signed an order making hospitals and insurers disclose their upfront costs, and that fulfilled yet another one of his campaign promises. And listen, transparency is the starting point for pressure, just as our guests were talking about earlier today. When you make things public, people can do things like check on election integrity or check on what's going on in government agencies. I think this is a big move, and not only a promise made and promise kept, but it's going to affect the marketplace long term. We've had a lot of cost inflation under Obamacare.
Yeah. One thing I learned when I joined a medical or a health sharing service is the disparity between the cash out-of-pocket price and the price that insurance companies pay. So if we can get, create competition with that type of freedom in medical billing. All right, everybody, thanks so much for joining us tonight. We're going to be back here tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Eastern here on Real America's Voice. Grant Stinchfield is going to take you through the next hour of headlines. Have a great night.